All right, thanks for hopping on this last session of the Web IDE project maintainer onboarding. Uh, we're gonna dive into another issue than the one we've been working on. So let me close some of this stuff. Okay. So we've been working on fix opening from a commit, and we did this for the most part. I'm gonna wrap this up on my end and then hopefully assign it to one of you all to review and merge. But I think for us to spend the most of to get the most usage out of our time, let's dive into a separate issue. This one's pretty straightforward, but it's going to require a different set of changes for sure. Is previously in the old Web IDE, when you are creating a branch after making a change, the default branch name that we kind of generate includes your user ID. Right now, that doesn't happen. Let me open up the Web IDE real fast so you can see what does happen. All right, we're pulling all of the files from the main GitLab project. Boom, great. So if I make a change to our philosophy, and I go to commit to new branch, this leave empty to use master patch random characters. This normally contains the username in the default branch name as well. So that's what we want to somehow pull from the GitLab context what the current username is and throw it into what the default branch would be. Okay, so we'll check that out. All right, so let me go ahead and get the Web IDE project open. Let me make sure I'm on a clean branch. Okay, looks like I'm behind a little bit, so let me update on, so now I'm on the latest of main. That's great. Okay, everything's clean. So let's create a new branch. I'm just gonna call it add username to default branch. Okay, cool. All right, let me go ahead and start the Web IDE over here. So running start example. I'm gonna push this over just a little bit. Okay. All right, it's building everything. All right, so right now there's no concept of what the current username is at all built into the Web IDE. So we're going to need to get that from the GitLab session context. And the main mechanism for injecting things in from the outer GitLab context into the Web IDE is through the config. So I can kind of assume we're going to need to update our config that we get. And so we talked a little bit about the difference between there's a client-only version of the Web IDE and a remote version of the Web IDE, this remote development one. VS Code, when you start it up, you can give it, you can like connect it to a VS Code server through like SSH and stuff. And when this like remote config, these are like VS Code parameters for, we're going to start up VS Code, but it's going to run through a, we're looking for a VS Code backend so that you can actually run the terminal and have whatever kind of environment extensions you need. That's needed for our remote development feature offering. It's not it's related to the Web IDE, but for the most part, a lot of our development lives here because when we don't have a VS Code server we're connected to, we kind of have to make everything on the client. And so I don't think that the remote config thing is going to need the username information. I don't often really touch the remote config thing a lot because it's just meant for that one little bit that we needed for remote development. And so the question is, should I add this username property to base config or client or client only config. And I'm thinking, oh, I like that picture. That's a cool picture. I like that. It was like it looked like a monster cake. I'm gonna assume that you're telling me about it.
Yes, he's telling you all about the My Singing Monster. But we
Yeah,
can get back to
it looks really cool. I like it. I kind of want to throw my Pikmin at it. I like it. All right. Well, because remote config is not going to need the username, I don't want to add it to base config. So base config should only contain things that both the configs need. So I'm going to opt to making this more specific by default, and I'm going to put username here. I don't know if we like username being camel case or all lowercase. I have no idea, but I'm going to put it here. And I am going to say that it's optional because so far we've been running without it. And so I don't want to introduce like a breaking change. So I'm going to leave this as optional. Say the current username for the GitLab context. This is used for things like generating default branch names. And I'll add a link to the issue. All about adding all of that traceability to everything. Because I'll forget. Okay, cool. Let's see if we have this running. If I go over to my terminal, yeah, it looks like we built everything successfully, so that's looking great. I'm going to move all your faces over. All right. Okay. And I also have the GDK running, so we should be able to start from here. Maybe I don't have the GDK running. Yeah, looks like I don't have the GDK running. Come on. Why aren't you running? All right, let me go ahead and start the GDK. So in the meantime, instead of connecting to the GDK, I'll just connect to gitlab.com, and this should work. It's going to throw the warning that I don't have write access because I didn't provide an access token to it. That's all fine. Great. I'll provide a token to it once the GDK actually starts up. All right. I want to somehow test the username stuff in this example app. So somehow in here, I'm going to need to inject. I want to inject the username. So all of this like configuration parameters for setting up this web ID package that's decoupled from the main GitLab project. As you can see, this kind of grew in scope since it first was developed. We got this checkbox here and we have this thing here. Like, so I don't want to just keep adding, and there's obviously probably better things we can do. I don't want to just keep adding fields to this thing, although I could. Another thing that we were doing to inject values into the example app, and none of this is super documented, but here's where you can find it, is in the example package in the web ID component. This is where we like set up the config so you can see where these things come from. So if we go to start client only, we're passing in a bit of the config. We spread those properties when we are calling our start method. But then we also get some config values from query parameters. And that's kind of a simple way to inject fields. So I think that's where we're going to throw the username. So you can, through the example app, you can test what happens when we have a merge request ID, when we have like file paths, and these are the kind of query parameters we get normally from the in the actual project itself. But I think I'm just going to throw username. And I'm going to put it at the bottom because I don't really quite know where else to put it. Get username. Yeah, so we'll just do something like this. This partial thing is super cool. If you're not super familiar with TypeScript, if I didn't have this correctly, it would start yelling at me. So this is ensuring that I'm only returning part of the keys in here, but they have to be keys in there. So that's kind of cool. TypeScript super smart. Partial is like a built-in TypeScript. What would they call it? It's like a utility type kind of thing. Okay. Cool. So let's do that, but let's also go ahead and consume it so that I can get the full feedback loop while I'm testing this thing out. So I'm jumping into where a lot of the runtime logic of the client web ID lives, which is in this VS Code extension. This is our built-in extension, which is the engine that runs like getting the file system and loading all those VS Code specific stuff we need. Okay. But we also get so the activate command that's exported here, this is our entry point into there. And I kind of, what I want to do right here is I want to just get the config that we started things with, and I want to show message the username. I want to see if we can do that. There's some other things in flight right now and other MRs I know are going to make this easier. So one of the ways this is set up, I'm hesitating because I'm right now trying to think of what's the easiest thing we could do at this moment. But one of the ways this is set up, this function only runs once. We call this initialize with progress, which calls initialize. But we have this function then, like this initialize function, that gets, you see, that gets referenced here when we do this register reload command. Because after I've made a commit or after I've made a change, we kind of need to like reload everything that we just got. Because sometimes when I make a commit, other commits have already happened underneath me, and there's even like file system changes. So after I've made a commit on the web ID, we kind of need to get the latest of stuff. And so current way of doing that is let's dispose everything and just start over. And so all of that lives in this initialize function. It's like, okay, we either just made a commit or we just loaded. We are starting all this stuff up. And we call our mediator commands, which is we have this weird start one, which makes all of those initial fetch requests. But what we don't have in this scope is reference to the mediator command that just returns the whole config. And in a separate MR that's in flight, I have added that here. And I'm thinking maybe we want to just do the same thing, which would probably be the easiest. Or, so that's one option. Rather than here we have a start that we're referencing the mediator commands, we can just have one called get config. And then we can just get the username clearly from there. Or we update start to return the username that we need from the config. What's your preference?
I suppose if we have an in-flight MR which is doing the changes, can we like strip out the change? Like we like cherry pick just that set of like subset of changes?
It's a good idea. Yeah. It's really small too. It's like we can even just redo it here because it's the so let's do that here. I don't want to add to start, which was my concern.
But and even if we're doing like the quick and dirty thing, could we either use local storage or even like either local storage or like persist the query prom?
So that's an interesting question. So the VS Code extension runs in a sandbox. So it does not get any access to the outside session. So, but with the exception of we can write things to like a VS Code specific storage. But I'm still not like super familiar with that. It might be possible. But for right now, it's kind of the config is the thing that holds everything. So we already have the mediator command for getting the config because the VS Code extension project needs to use this. The only difference is we're not calling this from our web ID extension. And so we just need to add a reference to this in our VS Code extension web ID package where we have our mediator thing here. I just need to add one where I'm export git config. And yeah, let's just copy what I had going on in a separate MR. So here, this has been, okay. All right. Yeah, I updated some stuff with some types because, yeah. For some reason, these types we're referencing just a very small subset of the config, but we actually, let's just use it to return the whole config. So I'm going to update, we're going to manually copy some of these changes over. I'm going to start here with the types one. So in mediator command source types, let's go there. Mediator command source types. So I'm adding a reference to this. This is coming from that interop package where the what the desktop VS Code extension is going to expect in the web ID environment. And I am saying that this full config, which contains this extra thing, that's kind of a code smell, but it's fine for right now. It's going to extend to both client only config and interop config. Interop config is just a subset of that client only config, which we could probably update our interop to do that as well. But TypeScript is smart enough to just be able to resolve all this. So we're kind of cool. And if any of these properties start to get out of sync, we'll start getting type errors and we'll be able to resolve it. But now that I'm doing that, that gives me the confidence to make this change and not feel any negative effects. So here where I'm doing git config, this is an interop command that the separate repository is dependent on. But because I said that full config extended the interop config, I can replace my interop reference with this one and feel confident that we're okay. And we are. So that's me kind of explaining some of this typing changing that I'm doing here. But since everything's compiling, I feel pretty good. Then the last thing we want to do you see what just happened? This happens to me a lot. I'm here and I click on a file and it takes me to the very top. Okay.
I don't see this happening like on Chrome though, so maybe it's Firefox. I mean, never happened to me before. I used Chrome.
Maybe that's a good point. Okay, all right. Here's me adding reference to getting the config in our web ID VS Code extension. It needs to call the mediator command. So we're going to add a reference to our git config command. Here, when we're importing these different types, I want to make sure I'm referencing the same type that we used to declare that command. And then here, I'm going to actually have the function to get the config. Cool. All right. So now I can get the whole config, pull just the username bit from it and use that as I want, and not worry about further selling all of the business that Start does. Okay. So let me hop up to the top of this and let me see if I can do this. Equals await git config. We good? Yay, we're good. Hooray. Okay. So then I'm just gonna drop into here. If username, let's do something like await VS Code dot window dot show information message. Hello. Yeah. Just what do you think you're doing, username? Okay, cool. So now I should be able to see that come in. Let me go ahead.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure if maybe I'm wrong, but I remember that you said that if you don't have a username, this will set a default username, an empty string. So maybe you will always have a username, right?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a really good question. And in JavaScript, empty string is falsy. So I can check for,
Right.
so I'm guaranteed it's going to be a string with a length greater than 0 at this point. But yeah, that's a good question. And you're right. I defaulted it to an empty string. And so I need to be able to, I need to not just do, and for that reason, you'll see, I think throughout the code is like, I'm not going to just do a specific falsiness check because I'm concerned about it actually being there. So I'll do more permissive, just, I want to do the full truthy check, make sure this isn't actually string. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good question. Okay. So I'm here and no. Okay. All right. Okay, cool. So I should run this. I should get no message and everything loads. All right. I get no message. Everything loads. Okay, great. So let me then add username equals Paul. Let's see. Oh, look. Hello, Paul. All right. We're cooking with gas. Cool. All right. So this isn't what we wanted to do. We actually want it to be used elsewhere. So when I am generating that, why are you still loading? Oh, it's still loading because I waited for that message. So that's an interesting thing. Did you see what just happened? The way these VS Code messages work, when I await one of these calls, these are asynchronous calls and they will respond. It's possible for me to provide like different set of actions to it and they'll respond with the key of the action that was taken or something like that. But if I want to just fire and forget a message, I shouldn't await it. Since I awaited it, nothing else was loading until I closed this out. So then once I close it, then everything else will load. Some quirks with the VS Code API of like, when you see us, sometimes we'll need to wait something, and sometimes we want to just show a message and don't wait for it. So you'll see that. And because we have an ESLint rule about, hey, promises must be awaited, you'll see us saying, this thing doesn't really work. I don't know why that's a suggestion. But you'll see us just disabling for this line and saying something like, we want to fire and forget here, or something like that. Okay, cool. To do, remove. We probably already greeted the user. We don't want to come across as too friendly. Okay, let's see if we can actually get okay, are we actually running now? Are we gonna be okay? GDK, come on. Oh, but it is, wait, is it pulling? It's not pulling from it. If I do GDK, that, So I have this same project in ref in my local GDK. I think it's going to time out. Come on, GDK, you could do it. You know, sometimes the GDK really puts the GD in the GDK. All right. Let's restart it. All right, yeah, this is gonna go right now. So I wanted to do that so I can get to the I wanted to get to the menu where I'm creating a new branch, because that'll help me find where it is in the code. But I'm gonna go ahead and cheat, and we'll open the GDK here. That's not cheating. It's I mean, we'll open up the web ID here. I'm not gonna wait for the GDK to start. Okay, we good? We're good. All right. Started making changes, committing to a new branch. Okay, leave empty to use. That's the thing I'm gonna look for. Leave empty to use. Leave empty to use. All right, cool. We got this cool thing called prompt branch name. All right, we've got this thing called generated branch name. Okay. So I think the change here is probably pretty straightforward, where we can take an optional parameter of the username. And how do we want to do this? Something like, how do we feel about ternaries? Maybe not. Maybe in this case, it's okay.
Yeah, I think this is pretty straightforward, so it's fine.
I thought it would be easier than like, what am I thinking? I thought it'd be easier than somehow like shoving it in the middle of it when it has.
Yeah. Well, I suppose if you shove it in the middle, if it's empty, if it's falsy, you could just say ampersand, ampersand, empty string, maybe. Oh no, then you have to deal with like the.
But we'd have to
like,
still concat
hyphen.
the like hyphen and stuff. Yeah. All right. The one question I do have though is I want to make sure we're consistent with how the old web ID was doing this. So I'm gonna look for username inside of IDE files in the current project. Not quite. Oh wait, here we go. Yeah, look at this. Okay. Oh, it looks like it starts with the username. Okay. So we will start ours with the username. Oh man, a lot of me is okay. Yeah, I'm gonna have to. I was like, all right, I'm gonna do something like this. We have suffix equals username pop. Otherwise, it's empty, and then we can just return suffix. I spelled suffix wrong. Okay, something like that.
Prefix now as well, because you moved it around a bit.
Prefix. It's not. You're right. It's not the suffix. All right. Okay, cool. Generate branch name. That's kind of doing the thing we wanted to do now. Prompt branch name. Now that needs the username. Okay. So, all right, I'm gonna pause real fast. I could, like, one option is generate branch name. This thing calls the mediator, or like even this one, this calls that mediator command to get the config and to get the username and like doing all of that. But throughout all of this, you can see there's some pretty poor state management of like, we want to have a nice single place where a state lives. And I would love for to not tie everything to that like state store where our state is. And that might, so for the meantime, I try to just leave like the main entry point, that glue code is the bit that runs as separating like our business logic from the bit that's actually integrating with everything. So that's one of the reasons why I'm opting to use parameters instead of just coupling this to the config, although maybe that's a totally acceptable approach. I just, without thinking about it, I'm like, let's try to avoid that if possible, if it makes sense. Who knows? It might not make sense. All right, so now let's see where we use this thing. Let me go to references of prompt branch name. Get branch selection. Okay. Okay, yeah, we do this a couple of times. Maybe I do want to call the config from here. What do you think?
I suppose. Well, what areas are we calling it now? And do we have config accessible nearby currently? Because it looks like we're calling like a helper.
We're gonna be another we're gonna have to go another layer up. So like what I'm imagining is the option is, and so this is a big to-do for developer experience lovability on the project, is we need a single source of truth for state in this package, which we don't have. And so we just pass all the parameters down. What we're going to need to probably do is something like, okay, we're initializing source control. We're going to have to add to this list. Here's the current username, and like trickling all of that down. I have another, work that's been shelved, but I'm going to unshelve it hopefully soon, is we want to create things that are able to reactively, watch state, kind of like you would expect with like view components. We can do that from this context. Just takes a small amount of setup. But yeah, we're gonna have to like do the props drilling down a handful of levels, and that's not desirable. I kind of am thinking, let's just throw this into here. What do you think?
Yeah, I think having like view like state management where you can have like, well, I'm thinking of like React. I'm more familiar with React, where you have like providers and consumers though. So if you have something that's providing at the top level and then something much like further down can consume it,
Yeah,
I think that would be great down the line. But
yeah.
for now, given the way we're doing states, I think it's probably okay to drill through.
So yeah. So what do you think we should handle this through passing of parameters down the stack, or should we just directly fetch the username from the config?
Oh, so are you proposing that for now we just pass the config in to the function?
Well, we need to pass it in. I could just call the mediator command from here, like from prompt branch name. I could just call the mediator command. To get the username.
That's probably fine.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. I guess we're not being explicit, and I'm sure, like with config, do you have any secrets or anything sensitive in there, or is config always like data that like is sort of known to the entire plugin?
It is data that's known to everything. It technically can contain, for instance, in the example project, when I'm giving it a token, the config will contain the token. But this doesn't happen in the actual running instance of GitLab because we don't use tokens like this. We just use the main browser session naturally. Like, so it's not going to contain any secrets, so it should be fine. we already have like this, we already have this command for doing this. With that being said, we do have it in the pipeline to move away from the whole mediator commands, because we've architected the VS Code approach for how we can authenticate requests seamlessly without needing that. They have like their secret storage and like authentication providers and stuff. So the goal would be a moving away from mediator commands. But like what you said about, yeah, we want to have some sort of store that has state that provides something, and then other things can declare themselves as like, hey, I'm dependent on this state. I want to like hook me up with it. Maybe this kind of code makes that dependency clear of like, hey, all of this needs to be hooked up with the current username. So like when we do that refactoring, that's
yeah, I think it's okay to have it there until you have, maybe if you need that username located in other components, then you can make it available in the initialize. But now that you only need it here, maybe it's okay to have it there instead of reading all the passing the argument
yeah.
All over the place.
Yeah, I think it's going to make it the dependency of things a little simpler when we refactor things down the line. So let's maybe try that out. So much love I want to do this project. I'm so glad we're gonna have so many maintainers that can review all the refactoring MLRs. Cool, I like it. Let's do it. Hopefully we can abstract state into something that can be easily provided, injected. Made be active and easily provided. Yeah. So I actually have a branch for this. It's just I think I stopped because I was in this kind of elaboration phase with it, and so I had touched a whole bunch of like what's the ideal state, and I really liked the approach. I just haven't, okay, now that I have some sort of ideal, I need to find the iterative steps towards that so we don't just have one crazy huge MR. Okay, but let's go ahead and do this. But it does bring me to one thought, is we get this config every time we call prompt branch name. But here's the deal. I mean, every time we do this, are we going to execute this command and wait for it and stuff? Like the config should never, ever change. So what do you all think of, just memoizing this?
Yeah.
All right.
Sounds like a good idea.
Is there actually a memoize function already? That's awesome.
I think because we're using Lodash, so I think it's just like, boom, let's just do it. So, all right. This is memoize because the config should never, ever change. Oh, wait. Cool. At least I'm making note of my assumptions. All right. So yeah, if we go back to where we're at, we added the username there. This was updating the mediator command so that it's, oh wait, this is our VS Code extension so that we actually have this in our list of reference mediator commands. We updated generated branch name. It's clear this is like a, let me go back. Let me make this whiter. It's clear this is a utility function that should not reference any kind of commands or something like that. So like, hopefully that's clear how this is a bit more glue codey than the generate branch name function. Here we reference git config. That's great. And then these are updating just those types. And I think it's going to be it. Cool. I just had a crazy thought though. Oh no. Is it possible for a username to contain characters that are not allowed in a branch name? Do we even care about that? We might care about that. I think a username actually, I think it's allowed for a username to have a dot in it.
What kind of characters are not allowed in a branch name?
I think a dot is not allowed.
Okay.
I think a dot is allowed because you can have dots and tags. And I think that's just, yeah.
Maybe it is. Then that's great. Okay. Oh,
Oh yeah, there's actually a git command for it. So you can do git check ref format. And it'll let you put in a string and it'll tell you if it's valid or not valid.
oh, cool. So it does allow a dot.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. All right. All right, here we go. Yes. All right, we're in. All right. Adding my username. I'm gonna make it lowercase letters just for fun. All right. Let me add, I'm gonna stop pausing my screen because I need to open up 1Password where I have my token in. Okay. We're back to sharing. Boom. All right. I start making a change. I go here, commit to new branch. Woohoo! There it is. All right. I press enter. And we've made the branch. What's wrong with you? Oh, it's because I'm not signed in to the GitLab instance. Now we should be good. Yeah. Sweet. Okay, cool. Let's try the no username use case. The no username use case. Oh, I gotta add the token back. All right. My 1Password should be available. All right. Pop. All right, let's try this again. Make some random changes so that source control lets me do some commits. Commit to new branch. Cool. I didn't provide a username. We didn't blow up. That's important. Cool. And I keep calling this again. So yeah, it's happening. Great. I love it. Is it generating a new? Yeah, it's generating a new little thing every time. Cool. Awesome. All right. I think that's about it. So I think now we can actually probably push this up, but let's say maybe add some tests maybe before doing that. So we could do some test coverage and then call it a day and then all become maintainers and hopefully improve upon the quality of the project iteratively. Yeah, there's not much behavior that's changed that's going to need testing. I just see it in generate branch name and prompt branch name. We don't test the example components because that's just an example thing. Like we could, but it's not worth it. Not worth it's not the right answer, but it's kind of what I mean. I think we have a test for here. So yeah, let's try to copy the pattern of the tests here and see if we can add test coverage for that file change. We have pretty good test coverage. I forgot how to run the Jest coverage example, but it's like in the upper 90%. So we try to keep everything pretty well unit tested because we're still lacking like integration testing, which we'd really love to do. of like have Cypress or something like that running through some of the use cases. We have like end-to-end coverage on the other end of the scale, and we have like feature spec coverage after everything gets run into it. But it'd be nice to have some integration coverage on this project itself so that we have some more immediate feedback when it looks like something isn't going to work in that regard. But that's fine. All right, let's try this thing out. All right, we're not passing any arguments to it. I added a line to it. I'm going to run watcher on this file. Cool. All right, it worked. If I, yeah, so when I call that mediator command, we expect it to have been called. Great. We can add an assertion that it's memwise. Maybe that's a wise thing to do. Git config is memwise. So I'm going to do something like I expect VS Code commands execute command not to have been called. Oh, that's maybe kind of assumed by the other test, but that's fine. And then I will, I think this is mock, so I can do VS Code commands dot execute command mock resolved value. Yeah, I'm gonna add, this is like our test config. So we'll return our test config, the result of git config. Oh, I gotta make this. There we go. Okay. So I would expect this to only have been called once. To have been called once. And I would expect result 1 to be result 2. And I'd expect result 1 to be test config. It didn't get called at all. It didn't get called because it is memwized. Yeah, it didn't get called because it's memwized and it's called in the previous one. That's fine. Yeah.
Can you complete the memoization in the it block?
Was
Can
it
you say it again?
Yeah, I mean, if you are going to test the get config, the memoization, and you have it already memoized, maybe you want to clear the memoization in that it block.
I think you're totally right. So there is, I forgot how Lodash does this.
looks like there's a resolver argument which returns the cache key.
Yes, I'm gonna look up memwise in our test files because I know I've done this before. Oh no, don't tell me it can't be. That's the only one. Oh my goodness, that's disappointing. Okay, I know I've done this before, but yeah, you're right. There's this thing called all right, I'm gonna have to open up the file. So we're here in VS Code extension, web IDE, mediator. Here we go. All right, this thing returns a, yes, it returns like a memwized function. So you're right, I should be able to do something like this, and it should be smart enough to know that I can do git config dot cache clear. Yes, 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 yes. What? All right. Yes, brilliant. So if I was smart, I would probably do this in a after each for each, clear memwise things keep test determinism. Yeah, I don't know why cache, I don't know why clear would be optionally not available, but oh well, it looks like it's there. Cool, great. Nice, so we added that test. Let's go to generate branch name. That should be fun and easy. All right. Subsequent calls are not equal. Man, that's the testing out. It's not a purely deterministic test there. So I guess we want to test it includes username when given. Expect generate branch name, main username, lorem ipsum, and I'll copy this thing. Pop. Lorem ipsum. I'm running the wrong test. There's some cool like VS Code Jest extensions. I just don't have them installed because they don't work well on the main project, which has so many Jest tests. So the chances are they would work nicely on this project. Cool, we did that one. Then this is the last one. We let's check this one out. All right, let me close our other tabs. Let me open this one up. Okay, so something that's already happening is we're mocking the generate branch name in this unit test, which that totally makes sense. I kind of see that we're going to need to probably do the same thing for like the config mediator command. The new thing that we added here. So let's go ahead, excuse me, let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to mock this, and that lets me do something like this. So when I'm getting all of my mediator commands in my before each, I can do something like get config mock resolved value. I can do something like this. It's not going to like it because it's expecting it to actually be a config. And so I don't think I have a full config I can actually put in there. So I'm actually going to just cast it to a config since we're just in testing land. Sometimes we'll just do partials, but then cast them to the full type so that Jest doesn't start complaining about it. We could do something like this. This might be smart. Have my test config and actually say this is partial of a full config. So I'm actually have some assurance that I'm doing user. Let's just call it lorem user. Why are you upset? Oh, just because you're not used. You want to be up here. Okay. So then I'll put test config here. That way I know if I'm providing something that's not actually part of it, I can get some early feedback on that because I moved it to its own variable and gave it a type. I'll get early feedback if I'm doing something that's not matching the type. All right, let's run this test. Hopefully everything's still passing. Cool. Okay, cool. So here we've hard coded, this is the generated branch that we're doing. So that's not going to change. But what I think I want to add is just like, okay, are we calling generate branch name with the username that we expect? That's, I think, a little bit is what I'm expecting we would do. So it passes username to generate branch name. So expect VS Code, or no, expect generate branch name to have been called with. I don't know what you're going to be called with. What are you called with? So let's let it fail and see. Okay, where'd test main come from? Oh, that's the test branch. Test branch, and then test config dot username. Cool. Great. We're at all the test coverage. This is ready to go. So I'm gonna commit this, push it up, create an MR. I'm gonna add thanks to you all. But then I think I'm actually gonna assign it to one of you to merge pretty soon. So that'll be fun. Well, thanks for all of your help and participating in this project and participating in these sessions. It was awesome hanging out with you all this month.
Thank you for everything.
Yes,
Very
thank
good.
you. I'm gonna go design the NeoVim session to look exactly like yours because this has been fantastic.
Oh, brilliant. Yes. Yeah. Well, also, this is all inspired from what Tomas kicked off with the VS Code extension. So if you're looking for more TypeScript projects to be maintainers to, I think there's an ongoing need in the VS Code extension for maintainers as well. So awesome. Thanks, everybody. And if you have a chance to play Pikmin 4, I highly recommend it. It's lots of fun. All right.
Sweet.
Okay.
You.
Okay, later.
Have a
Bye.
good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.